So, welcome to Sociology 100, and maybe some of you have taken sociology in your high school dual enrollment or in another college or somewhere else, and maybe you have some idea how sociology as a discipline came about. Sociology is a study of how individuals, when we interact among one another, when students interact with professors, or when students interact with teachers, when patients interact with nurses and doctors and pharmacists and whatnot, this in turn is going to affect our life outcomes in different domains in terms of educational attainment, our health and well-being, the treatment we are going to get, how doctors, nurses, or those in authority are going to respond to us. And all this is going to in turn determine our life outcomes. According to sociologists, our life outcomes began with human interaction. When all these human interaction, they form a pattern. We call these patterns or regularities the social structure. And this social structure in turn is going to affect our life outcomes in different domains, in health, in education, in our income, in our wealth and asset accumulation, and so on and so forth. And this was what that was going on in the 19th century Europe. First, we have the Enlightenment movement, and later we have the French Revolution. And around the same time of the French Revolution, we also have Industrial Revolution. These three major events is what contributes to the birth of sociology as an academic discipline. So nowadays, if you don't know what is Enlightenment, you have no idea about this movement, we can always ask Dr. Google. Just Google the word and you can see the Enlightenment movement is an intellectual movement in 17th and 18th century Europe. And during this movement, new ideas like more emphasis on reasoning, individualism, liberalism came forth. And these ideas like reason, individualism, liberalism, capitalism, or the advent in science, medicine, and technology or health are initiated by a few pioneers like Bacon, Descartes, Locke, Adam Smith, James Watt, Newton, and Jenner. So, when these individuals, even Kant, Goethe, Voltaire, Rousseau, maybe they saw some changes in society and they saw something different from the previous feudalistic society, and they wanted to try to understand what's going on and where were they heading in Europe back then. So they came forth with all these new ideas with more emphasis on reasoning, individualism, liberalism, capitalism. And with all this also comes the advent of science, medicine, healthcare, and technology. So these were the three major events: the Enlightenment movements, the French Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. These three main movements contributed to the origins of sociology. As you can see from here, the French Revolution may have came forth because of people back then being exposed to some of these new ideas. So, when society began to change, and especially after Industrial Revolution, things are changing, or things were changing so rapidly, and because of that, the traditional philosophies or religious texts, they were not sufficient to explain the changes that was going on and to tell people where these changes were heading towards, what direction they were heading towards. So because of that, some of these pioneers, they focus on reasoning, individualism, liberalism, to try to explain what's going on in society with these three events taking place. So this was what took place in the 19th century Europe, industrialization. With industrialization comes modernization, and then we have technological advancement. All the infrastructure were being improved, machines being built, factories being built. And with all this comes the process of urbanization, where people move from the rural areas. They gave up their agrarian lifestyle, their agrarian livelihood occupations to some degree, and they moved to the urban areas to work in the businesses, the factories, or the somewhat modern hospitals. And we also saw more emphasis on rationalization with these three events taking place in Europe back then. And the feudal system was consistently being undermined. So, even during this time, some of these early pioneers like Kant, Goethe, Voltaire, Rousseau, Locke, Descartes, or Adam Smith, they began to question the hierarchies that existed during feudalism. Why peasants were different from the nobles and the kings and whatnot? Why knights were different from the nobles and the king? Why they live a different lifestyle? Why the king and the nobles had a better livelihood back then? They started to question the privileged positions of the kings and the nobles under the feudalistic system. With all this taking place, and because of that, gradually a modern state came to fruition and began to gradually replace the feudal system. And this was part of the reason that contributed to the French Revolution, right? But with all these things taking place, people, they start to question certain things in their own society. They also question the Black Plague, why it killed so many people, and why people back then, under the feudalistic society, were affected differently by the Black Plague, why things seem to be unequal during the feudalistic society. People started to question all these things using reason, and because of that, people back then, when they question all these things, they gave more emphasis to individualistic notions and liberalism, and this increasingly gave rise to the concept of capitalism. And the concept of capitalism, initially it was a concept, then it was implemented as an economic system. And as we can see, when all these changes took place, capitalism gradually, increasingly replaced the feudalistic economic system of land ownership. So all these things that happen in combination gave rise to sociology as an academic discipline. And all these pioneers back then, even though they emphasized reason, individualism, liberalism, they have not created a new discipline. Only Auguste Comte, he was a French, he started a new discipline. He coined the term sociology, and he tried to establish sociology as a scientific study of our society in our attempt to find out the changes that was taking place and where the changes are heading towards. Auguste Comte, he started sociology as a discipline to try to understand all these things. And he also started sociology as a discipline to try to find out the laws that govern our society, a different society, because of all these three major events. He tried to find out the laws that govern a different kinds of society than the feudalistic system. He also tried to establish sociology as a formal academic discipline to try to understand what are the forces that hold society together and why social change happen, why people progress from hunter-gatherers to some other societies in between, to the feudalistic society, and then to a modern European society. And Auguste Comte also invented the word positivism. And we can ask Dr. Google, what's the meaning of positivism? It's a philosophical notion. Positivism means rational, justifiable means that hold society together. All these rational, justifiable means, they serve like a glue that holds our society together. And these rational, justifiable means can be our laws, our regulations, our belief system, our morals, our value system, and so on and so forth. These are all incorporated in the concept of positivism, and this concept was invented by Auguste Comte when he created the discipline sociology. And he invented the word positivism because he wanted to find out the factors that cause people to act in a certain way. Why people commit suicide? Why people commit a crime? Why people seek medical treatment? Why people delay medical treatment? Why some people committed a deviant act? Why some people are normal? Why some people abuse alcohol? Why some people are weird? Auguste Comte invented this word positivism to try to understand why people act in a certain way. Because as we can see, the traditional religious texts and philosophies were insufficient when all these changes took place to explain what was going on, when they seemed to see a transition in their society was taking place in Europe back then. Theology, metaphysics, religion, philosophies were insufficient to explain what propels people to act and behave in certain ways. And Auguste Comte figured maybe we need to resort to reason or scientific or natural laws, or even proof through experimentation, through analysis, through science and whatnot, to find out what causes people to act and behave in certain ways. And he also assumed that some of these rules or natural laws are generalizable or predictable. Sometimes we make certain decisions based on our past experiences. If that restaurant is not good, we will not go back there. Or if that restaurant is good, we will visit that restaurant again and maybe order the same dish. So, our actions and behaviors are generalizable and predictable. There are certain laws or rules that can serve as guide to predict what's a person's next action. So, through all these scientific mechanisms, through all this modern analysis, through all this mathematical modeling, or all this modern economics analysis, and according to Comte, if certain criteria are being met, that event is accepted as real, as a reality. So, this is a summary of how sociology came about. But actually, the discipline sociology or sociological mindset or sociological thinking came about way before all these events that took place. Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution or French Revolution. Certain thinkers in the past, like Ibn Khaldun, he was a historian in the Arab society. I think in the 13th century. He was mainly a historian. He used historiography to try to analyze the Tunisian Arab society back then. But when he tried to analyze the Tunisian Arab society back then, he also had a sociological mindset. He also incorporated concepts from economics or demography when he tried to understand the Tunisian and Arab society. So, this sociological thinking existed way back then. We can trace them back to the 13th century, way before all these things took place. He tried to understand what are the social dynamics that causes changes in this society in the 14th century. And another person who had a sociological mindset was Matuan Ling. He was a scholar, but he was also a general in ancient China. And when he tried to understand the dynamics in the Chinese society back then, he had a sociological mindset, even way before the discipline came about. And as a scholar and a historian and also a general, he tried to understand why people started a war, why people started a revolution back then, why people were dissatisfied with the emperors or the ruling officials when China was a monarchy, and why the general public back then in ancient China wanted change, and they started a revolution, they started a war when they wanted changes. And he tried to find out what were the social dynamics that led to a revolution, a social change, a war being started in ancient China. So that's all I want to say about the origins of sociology. Have a good day.